Well, hello, I'm Kathryn Jean Lopez from the National Review Institute, and I'm here with Melissa Buck coming to us from Michigan. This is the third, I believe, in a series, Free to Foster Fridays for National Adoption Month, and because we all need to be talking about foster care and adoption more. Melissa Buck is an American hero. She is mother. Oh, you tell me mothers don't do the most important work in the world, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you. You're not actually going to dispute this. And she and her husband have opened their home to children who were in foster care, children that a lot of us don't spend time with, know anything about. So I wanted to have her come on and talk a little bit about her story and maybe help encourage people to pray a little bit and take a look and see what their role in this foster care crisis we have in the United States might be. Not everyone, I always say, not everyone is called to be a foster parent or adopt, but you have a role to play in this. Anyhow, Melissa, thank you so much for being with us today. And can you tell a little bit about how you got involved in foster care?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I could talk all day long about foster care and adoption because I love it. It's such an important topic to, constantly talking about. My husband, Chad, and I tried to have kids and we were not able to. And we just felt God was really tugging at us to get into foster care and adoption. It was kind of a weird thought. It wasn't something I ever thought I would do. I thought I would straight up adopt a kid. And instead God was like, no, I'm going to open your heart a lot more than you're comfortable with. And we're going to do something here. And so he got us in touch. God just kind of pressed it. Such a cool way that he worked it out. We wound up getting in touch with St. Vincent Catholic Charities, who is just renowned in our area for the work that they do with foster care and adoptions. And we started the licensing process with them and just loved them. They made it so comfortable for us. It's an in-depth kind of a process. I'm not sure how much you're familiar with it. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of questions, a lot of training, a lot of, checking your water temperature to make sure you don't burn anybody. A lot of these really great things. Getting fingerprinted felt like a dream. And so you do all these things, but they just kind of walk you through it and hold your hand and just make you so comfortable with it so that when the time comes to take a placement, you really feel, the natural amount of fear, I think, that anyone would feel with a new kid that's coming in your home. But it's great knowing that you have this wonderful support system on your side. So we were able to take in a sibling group of 3 children and adopt them. And then we were able to, after that, we got our first newborn. She was not related to our kids, but she was medically fragile. She has a very rare genetic condition. It requires a lot of fun doctor visits and the like. And while we were in the process of adopting her, we got a call that a birth parent to some of our older children had another child, and could we keep siblings together again? And so we agreed. My Facebook reminded me today that 5 years ago today, the judge signed the paperwork for us for our youngest child. So it's kind of like a sweet little day. It was the first day we got to post his whole face on Facebook 5 years ago. But yeah, we've just been involved in all of that now, and we couldn't have done it without our agency. It's been through a lot of ups and downs, and getting along with birth parents. They trained us in that, and trauma, they trained us in that. And, just going through that whole process would never, I think, have happened if we didn't have such a good agency to rely on.
Was there ever a point in the process where you're like, this is too much, with all the indignities that come with it?
Yes. Oh yeah. I learned later, later I learned that, our oldest son, we took a sibling group of 3, and our oldest son was 4 when we got him, and he was responsible for the 2-year-old and the 1-year-old in his home. So he didn't have a childhood. And that made it very difficult for him to function in a typical family setting. He was not used to that, and he had a really hard time with women. Um, and I got that. I understood that. But walking through that with him was difficult. There were definitely days where I was like, I don't even know what I got myself into. I can't understand, what's going on with all of this. There were things that, things that you see and things that happen to your children and things you read about and the reports that you're just like, my heart is heavy and I'm not sure how I feel about all of this. And I think each kid brought their own moment of what have I done to the table in a way where we're just like, can we do this? A medically fragile child who, had to go down to Detroit, which is an hour and a half from us, to stay in the NICU for a week. I mean, how can we, like, this is new territory. But I mean, throughout all of that, the second we told our agency we were having issues, they were there to help. And I was saying, we found out later with our oldest son that he probably would have ended up in residential treatment, separated from his siblings and not in a home, had we not fought to keep him, to give him the services that he needed. And, our agency threw everything they had at him in order to do that. And if you saw him now, he's 15 and just the sweetest, like, compassionate, gentle. He's big, right? He's like solid. And so he got into football, but he wouldn't hit the other players because he was afraid of hurting them.
Oh,
So
wow. Oh, wow.
it's just such a turnaround, for him, like to become, to become that kid. And so I think, yeah, we definitely had those moments where it was overwhelming, but with our agency and pushing through and God, holding us close that whole time, we were able to push through and see these kids' true potential.
Wow, wow. And so you got involved in this case because with the Beckett Fund, because you had to fight for St. Vincent's to be able to continue to be the
Right.
essential partner for
families that it is. Yeah. So we were, I heard about this lawsuit that they were facing because of their faith. And I thought, there's just absolutely no way that we can allow them to close their doors. There's no way that we can allow them to take that gift of them away from our community. St. Vincent's does so much. They recruit more than the other agencies around them. They do the best at placing sibling groups, at placing minority children, at placing special needs children in loving homes. They are known for their children's home for children who are not able to be in a family setting yet because of the trauma that they've endured. It's like a rehabilitative, intensive therapy, safe place where these kids have a therapy dog, they have a garden. I mean, they treat these kids so well to prepare them to go into a family setting. And I'm like, how could we lose that over their faith? Like, they serve the needs of these kids and these families and these biological families so incredibly well that removing that would just, it would cripple the child welfare system in our area.
Well, and we're seeing this around the country. There was just this Supreme Court case that the Beckett Fund argued in Philadelphia, where literally these women are doing the work of Black Lives Matter, literally saving the lives of young Black boys, in particular in the case of Sharon L. Fulton. And I always say to people, like, pluralism is what we're built on. So yeah, you can disagree with the Catholic Church on marriage and other things, but let the choice be out there. And especially when you have places like St. Vincent's that do it so objectively well, right?
Right. And exactly. I am not Catholic. And so that's something that people have asked us a lot, like, well, you're Catholic, so that's why you went there. No, I'm not. And they are fine with me. We've never treated me any differently. They've just I've never felt uncomfortable there because they have just done such an amazing job with our kids and with, the foster families. obviously are friends with a lot of them. St. Vincent's put together a support group for, potential foster parents all the way through post-adoptive parents, so that we can kind of all come together and learn together and like grow that community with one another. And I'm just like, I mean, how could I ever think that they don't deserve to be there?
Right, right, right. Is there in your area, is there a community around adoption? Because I hear different things. Some people have the support of a church community and people who are an adoptive parents, but others are sort of in their isolated silo in some ways.
So typically, yes, I mean, in our church family, people have known we kind of, blazed that trail and for them, and just kind of very publicly fostered in front of them. And even though our friends and family weren't able to completely understand what it was that they were doing, they were able to see it. So that then when the next families started fostering, it's just kind of become, our church is very much, we are very like a tight little family, and that we support one another. We're going to do everything we can, for these kids, and we rejoice with them and we weep with them. But there isn't outside of that. It's really this group that we have through St. Vincent that it's open to all churches. It's open to all faiths. It's open to all types of foster families: single, divorced, widowed, married, same-sex couples, the gamut. It's all open. Everybody is free to come and talk. And that is the most significant support that I have received outside of the agency itself, is to go to this support group and see these families every month.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you were talking about weeping and rejoicing. What are for people who are listening, who are in the position where, they feel like maybe God's calling them, but they're really terrified and and they don't think they're equipped. And
Yeah.
what do you say? Share a little bit about your life.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we are equipped because we have God. In my opinion, me as a human being, of course not. I can't do it. I'm a not equipped that way, but we can do things with God who gives us that strength, and he comes alongside us and he equips us. And I think that scripture is full of that. When Moses was like, "Me, are you sure?" And God's like, "I gotcha." And other people are like, "Are you sure? Do you want me to do that?" And God's like, "Man, I will give you the words to say and the things to do." And I think that if God is there, if he's calling you at all to look into this, then you'd better do it, because he's not one to back off. He's not known to just be like, "Okay, you don't want to do it, it's fine." If this is God's call for you, if this is his desire for you, then he's going to make it happen. And I went along kicking and screaming at first, but he opened my heart and humbled me flat, to really look at things the way that he wanted me to. And I'm grateful for that, because he definitely, he'll hold you throughout all of this. In Isaiah, he says that it's him who's going to carry you. He's going to hold you up and sustain you to your old age and, gray hairs. Like, he's got you. And that's the God that we have. And that's the God that will hold your hand and walk you through this crazy, wild journey.
So for anyone who's listening who does not have that experience of God, that's really, really, really practically real in your life.
Yes.
In your big messy life with screaming children and
Yeah, I know. I warned you beforehand. I have a child here who's doing some therapy. Our youngest son is autistic, and there's been so many changes, and unfortunately that's led to a lot of just a little loudness on his part. And so I already warned you that there may be a kid coming in here at some point being like, "Mom." Yeah, it's completely practical. And our life is, it is loud. It is wild. It is crazy. There are kids everywhere. I'm doing virtual learning with 5 children, and I know you're all jealous of me. But like, it is completely practical to do this. You aren't alone. Yes, my faith carries me through a lot of things, but I also know that my agency carries me through so much too, and that they have hooked me up with other foster parents when I need that. And now in turn, I get to talk to other foster parents when they're just starting out and be like, "Listen, I've done this. It's okay. It is okay that you think this is weird, because it is, like we definitely get um that community, that dealing with other foster parents, where you can really just sort of be like, okay, yeah, this is a wild ride, and how do we, how are you getting through it? Okay, great, let's do it. And foster care is full too of respite, where you can exchange children with other families, like for a weekend. If you need a break, that's totally fine. It's welcomed. They have a word for it: respite. Like, it's a thing. Do it. And I think that there are just so many opportunities to succeed in foster care if you take hold of them.
And do you feel, Melissa, like foster care and adoption is like at the heart of the Christian identity? There's so many references to the orphan, and we believe we were adopted by God the Father.
Oh yeah, I mean, adoption is put out there throughout all of the Bible. I mean, how many times do they talk about adopting and being co-heirs, and how God adopted us into his family and to take care of the orphans and the widows? And we talk about, I mean, Jesus was born to Mary, but he was raised by somebody who was not his birth father. And he had siblings who were not his full biological siblings, and he was raised with them and loved them too. I mean, yeah, I think that the Bible is full of that. And I think that God definitely, he's always required us to take care of one another, Old Testament through New Testament. That concept has never changed, that we take care of him. You look at Abram, who took in Lot, who was his nephew after Lot's father passed away. Abram took care of him. He raised him, he rescued him. It's the story is in there everywhere you look. I mean, Moses was adopted. Come on now.
You must have a deeper appreciation for how God really does care for us, and really is the providential nature of him through adoption and foster care.
I am, and I'm overwhelmed often that, especially when I get to see the beautiful sides of things, where you see your kid having a breakthrough, and you see your child overcoming something that they've struggled with for a long time, and you see your kids, laughing and goofing around together, and hear them playing with one another. And those are the moments where you're just like completely overwhelmed by the fact that God would even let you do something so awesome. There are just beautiful moments in parenthood in general, for those who've had biological children, but for us, fostering, taking in these kids who, we get to break these cycles for them of homelessness and abuse and addiction, and to see them already, surpassing what people thought that they would be capable of. It's so beautiful and so overwhelming and humbling, and you definitely don't feel worthy of it often, which just makes it all the sweeter, that God chose you for it.
Right. To really save lives. I mean, it's horrifying to think what could happen to your children if you weren't in the picture.
I do not like to think about that. No, at all.
But it speaks to what you were saying, that God even allows you to be a part of that picture.
Right. It's incredible. The other night I could hear my boys, all three of them, 15, 12, and 6, sitting in the back room watching a cartoon together, and they were just cracking up watching it, just the three of them. And it was like there was such peace, and they were so happy and content. And I was like sitting in the living room trying not to ruin my mascara, because I was just like, it's so beautiful, and it's so beautiful. And it's like, man, those moments where you get to just kind of like experience that and think about, how those kids were when they first came to your home, and just how calm they are now. It's really cool.
It's like a miracle.
It is. And it's not from me, man. I'm telling you what. So for people that are all like, what a great parent. I am subpar on my best day.
Why it's so wonderful that you take the time that you do not have to talk about this. So, because I do think people think that foster and adoptive parents are like these superhero exotic saints who
we put our yoga pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of every the other moms in the world. We no, we go through extensive training and we have a lot of support, but honestly, the grace of God is an amazing thing. And we struggle too. The struggle to take a shower without anybody coming into the bathroom is real. The, struggle with kids when they can't sleep, and sometimes you just don't know what to do because they've been enduring trauma. I'm not an expert. I don't know everything, but I do know that love goes a long way, and that nurture over nature is a legit thing. And that, if you listen to your kid's therapist and you listen to the training and you listen to the experts, that you can overcome a lot. You just have to be willing to let others lead you, and then you can get there.
And also to have someone like St. Vincent's to help you to fight for the right resources, right?
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Like when I'm saying listen to all of that, they have therapists in their office. So because they do more than just foster care and adoption. They take care of immigration services, they carry refugee work. They have a huge counseling program that, for people with court appointed therapy, and classes are often sent there. And so our kids were able to have that benefit of a therapist who was right there in that building, easy to communicate between staff and the therapist and us, who would include us in those sessions, and come into our home to do therapy in our home, which is just unheard of. And we were, as long as we listened to them, we were golden, even when it seemed strange. Like, why would I need to do that? Then you do it and you're like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Oh, like, okay. All right. Yeah, I knew nothing about that. Good for you guys. Like you definitely see that benefit from their experience.
And you made an allusion to this earlier. How bad has coronavirus adapting been this year?
In our family?
Yeah, with online learning and
Well, first of all, virtual learning, let me tell you, it's fascinating stuff. And it's not been easy for them. Our youngest, is autistic, and he was receiving in-person therapy sessions. Finally, we started those back in June, and they were even able to help him with some of his schooling. But now Michigan is going through another round of like a little mini lockdown. And so all of his services have been moved to in-home, which means in my office at work. And it's hard for him. It's hard for his little body. It is hard for a kid who has struggles with adapting.
Mhm.
That's just hard. It's a lot of changes constantly. It's hard to keep anything straight for him. And so to watch him struggle with that has been really difficult. And our other children, some of those old behaviors that you haven't seen in a long time, when they're feeling caged, when they're feeling like they can't go anywhere, they can't do anything, when they're feeling that like restriction coming, it just sort of brings out some of those older behaviors that have been, lying a little dormant for a while.
Mhm.
And so we've seen some regression, and we've seen just some sort of like, you know, going, repetitive, cyclical behaviors. Thankfully, being able to contact our agency and say, hey, we're going through this again. Can you just enlighten us if there's anything new, or what we should do for this? How do we handle this? That's been really helpful. But I mean, it's been good for them too, to have all that time as a family. We played a lot more games together. We've been able to definitely strengthen that bond, watch shows together. I've learned that my kids like watching crime shows, which is weird, but great. So we do that, we watch a lot of those, and, we've learned we have a lot more similar interests in things. And so we've been able to spend some really good quality time together. And I think that's helped overcome some of that behavior, but it's still hard for all of them.
And in some ways, the second lockdown isn't easier than the first.
No, it's so
Maybe
much harder.
Yeah.
I think because they were just starting to really kind of get to go do things again. And now it's back to nothing. And they're poor, like their poor little hearts. They're just so sad. And, we're sad for them too. Like I completely understand why they're upset. And I
Right.
wish that I could change things for them too. And I wish, like, mostly for our youngest who struggles the hardest with that kind of change, it's not easy to watch him go
Mm.
through that.
Yeah. When I sometimes I hear adults complaining about this year, and legitimately so, but their poor hearts, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I think about them and just, how social they all were and how little interaction they have, like pure interaction they're having right now. And it's such an important time for them to have that.
Right.
It, it's really hard to sit back and just sort of watch them
Right.
be, let down by all of it.
Right. Right. So, can we talk about something that's very much on your heart, the siblings, like keeping siblings together?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. I know you're bursting to talk about this.
So many things I'd like to say. Yes. What would you, for us, for our kids, we got the call for our oldest three children that are a sibling group. They all have the same birth mom. Two had the same birth dad, one doesn't, and they were already split apart. They'd already been split, and they were split. The boys were in one place, and so we were getting the boys first, and our daughter was in another home because she was the easiest one to split off from them. She was completely flat. She didn't really seem to care where she went, what she did. And we fought to get her into our home because she was with another agency. So we pushed to get them together because it's the right thing for them. My husband and I, when we started doing this, we were like, we will not separate siblings, because my husband has always been of the mindset that, we like, that's all they have really, is each other. At the end of the day, they've lost their families, their relatives, their toys, their possessions, their home, everything that was familiar to them is gone. The only thing they have left that is familiar to them is each other. And to take that away from them would just be tragic. So we have always pushed for that. It is not something that is often pushed for. St. Vincent's does push for it, but typically, especially because to place a kid in a home goes so quickly from the minute you get the call to the minute they go to court and you have to have a bed for them, that it is often easier to split them up, because it is going to be difficult if you have a large sibling group to say, yeah, I found a home that can take 5 kids tomorrow. It's very difficult to find. And so they get split up. And then along with that, in the process, then when it comes time, if they are not reunified with their parents to be adopted, those kids are often adopted out from one another. And there's just, it's unfair. That would probably be the easiest, nicest word to say, that it is unfair to them that we would separate kids from one another in this way and to adopt them out separately. They're listed out on websites, often kids who are waiting. Michigan has their own website of waiting children. A lot of those children have siblings, and some of the profiles say that parents must be willing to adopt the other siblings in order to take them, but some of them just say should, or, well, we would be willing to separate them and adopt them out separately if we need to. And I have always felt that siblings belong together. And I think about all the ways that in our country we refuse to separate items. You can even find on like the Humane Society, where they won't separate pets. These 2 cats have to go to the same home. And people will say, we need to keep, these antiques together. They're a set. We're not splitting them apart. They're sold as a set. This is firm. This is how we're doing it. We have these first editions from this famous author, and they are not to be separated. We are only ever going to put them together in a set. And yet we have human being siblings that we are so quick to pick apart and weed out because, oh, I only ever wanted one child. This little girl would fulfill everything I've ever wanted. And so we're willing to separate actual sibling groups when we're not even willing to separate, pots and pans from a collection at a garage sale. And I just think when the integrity of material possessions is greater than that of children and their siblings, then we have a big problem. We have a huge problem. How is this child welfare? How is this beneficial to these children? And where did we fall apart in this line that we stopped valuing this human structure as it ought to be valued? Is it because they're children and they can't speak for themselves and they can't advocate for themselves, and so as adults it's just easier to do it this way? Are we just trying to get it done fast and quick and easy? Like, what is it that makes it okay to separate these children from one another? And then once they're adopted, they're now legally not considered siblings any longer. And so, therefore, they have no legal right to one another, no legal right to grow up near each other, to communicate with each other, to contact one another, to see each other ever again until they're 18 and can find each other somehow. And so I mean, obviously, like that's where my heart is right now, is keeping these sibling groups together, guaranteeing them at least an opportunity to grow up in communication with one another. Just really giving them that chance to hold on to the one thing that they have left from their life pre-foster care.
So what do you say to people who agree with you in theory about what you've just said, but don't know that they can have 5 beds ready in their house?
I would say, if you, it's so easy when we think about, if you got pregnant and you found out you were having triplets, would you separate them? Would you just keep the one? You'd keep all 3. If your sibling passed away and your nieces and nephews needed a home, would you separate them? You wouldn't. We wouldn't separate them. You would take them all. You'd find a way. And I think, yes, going from 0 to 4 children I went from 0 to 3 in overnight. I went from 0 to 3 and from a convertible to a minivan in 24 hours. And it was difficult, but you can make it happen. It's not impossible to do it. It is difficult and it's hard work. But at the end of the day, it's like, who are we doing this work for? Are we really more concerned about our feelings and our discomfort than we are about the benefit that it would give to those kids to be raised together? We're talking about the mental health of these children. We're talking about the emotional stability of these children. We're talking about so much for them. And I think as adults, we have to remember that we come second often. That we are adults and we can find a therapist if we needed to talk about it. We can find the support in other people to talk about it because we are capable as adults of doing these things. These are children, traumatized children who can't advocate for themselves, who don't have the right to advocate for themselves. And we need to remember what's truly important here. And really, what's the best use of our time and energy at that point?
Right. And like you were saying with the material things, what's actually important in life? What's
Right.
actually important in life is saving the lives of these children who don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, right. I know. And it really does. It really bothers me. I mean, it really just gets at me. It's just on my heart. It's so heavy right now. Chad and I are going to be adopting again. And did you know that? I don't know if I told you that.
Did not know that.
Did not? Oh, great. Well, here we go. And this is why. Our youngest came from a large sibling group on his mom's side. So we have Nate because his birth dad is the same as 2 of our other children. So we are keeping siblings together in that way. We got him from birth, picked him up from the hospital. But on his mom's side, there are many siblings, and they were split. One girl went to go live with her birth dad. 2 kids went to one home. 2 kids went to another home. Now, 2 kids stayed in that home and were eventually adopted by them. The one girl who went and moved in with her birth dad full time, he's a really great guy. He would bring her up to the agency to visit her siblings so that she didn't lose her siblings. And that way, we love him to death. Him and his wife are amazing. And the other 2 girls got split up eventually. And actually, the one birth dad wound up adopted his ex's child just to keep her close and as with her sibling. And the one daughter was adopted and moved out of state. and we were told we would get to have contact with her and we would get to see her. Unfortunately, the adoptive parents changed their mind. And when they got to this other state, this little girl had a really hard time with that, not seeing her siblings. And it did not, it just didn't, it didn't end well. And they wound up terminating their adoption of this child, who is now in another state, was at a home for a long time in like a children's home, and frankly would never be adopted again. I mean, you're talking about an older child with a failed adoption, with siblings in another state. This child would have aged out of the system. And my husband and I said, well, we said, no way are we having 6 kids. Come on, we're in a pandemic. But God said, I'm not letting you sleep until you say yes. I mean, we just did not sleep. We got up in the middle of the night one night and we looked at each other and we were like, I really feel like we need to adopt this kid. And my husband's like, I really think this is what we need to do. And we were like, same page, high five, let's do it. And so that's what we're doing. You know, we're filling out the paperwork. We're reopening our license. We are bringing this child back to her siblings. And the knowledge for her to know that she's going back to where she'll have regular contact with her siblings has completely changed her attitude towards things. It's all she's wanted is to be and they said, you know, as soon as she was dropped off and at the agency where she is out of state, it's all she's asked for. I want to see my siblings. I want to talk to my siblings. I just miss my siblings. And you think that the fact that was taken away from her,
right,
without her consent,
right,
it's frustrating, you know, to think that any kid could grow up like that. And it led to her adoption terminating because it just, she's not going to give up on seeing her siblings again. And, you know, we're very grateful. Again, I said, you know, we are always amazed at what God does, that he's giving us the ability to bring her here and to adopt her into our family and to have her live with her brother and then to have her have that continued contact with her siblings. So
well,
it's real to us.
I'm sorry.
This is very real to us. It's not just something I think about, you know, in my copious amounts of free time. Like, you know, it's not just something that I'm like, you know, thinking up, but it's so important to us. Like, we're living it.
Right, you know? Right. Which is why you have such tremendous credibility and your voice is so important in educating and nudging the rest of the country, you know. Well, and you brought up another issue that is so important about children aging out.
Right.
When I realized that there are 18-year-olds in America who purposely get themselves arrested so they have somewhere to sleep and eat and shower. That's something you cannot unlearn, you know?
Right. No, it's not.
And I feel like that's similar to what must have happened with you and Chad when you're thinking about adoption and you start to realize, wait, there are children in our state who don't have homes.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's the thing, you know, people are terrified of teenagers. I mean, I'm not. I work with them for a living, you know. I love the teenagers. I love them. But you know, people are terrified of these kids and adopting an older child. And, you know, the thing that always sparked my husband's interest in foster care in the first place is we lived in North Carolina for a while and he was working security in the mall. And the hallway that he had to walk down towards the office every day was lined with pictures of kids waiting for a home. Mm-hmm. And there was a teenager who said, I just want a mom who will love me unconditionally. And my husband was like, I mean, he was hooked. He knew at some point that this is what he was going to want to do. And really, truly, as much as these kids have been through, to send them out into the world without a forever family is traumatizing all over to them again. Right. And we need to do better.
Right.
We need to do so much better for these kids. There's a home somewhere for them. Right. You know, there isn't. And that's the thing, you know, there's counseling, there's, you know, there's so many there's resources. There's a camp in our area that you can send children to who they work with specifically foster and adoptive kids. There's so many resources available to us. Not everybody's always aware of that, you know, because if you're not fostering, you're not trying to access those things. But we need to do better in our country. We need to make sure that these kids have a place to call home, that they have a place to live and a family to go to when they need them.
Well, besides thinking through, am I equipped to deal with trauma and mental illness and all these things? I think people also say, well, I don't have enough money to be able to pull this off. I don't get the impression you guys are millionaires.
Oh yeah, no, I shop at Aldi all the time. It's very generic at our house right now. No, we're not millionaires. We never have been, never proclaimed to be. I mean, if you look, if you came over, you would tell. But here's the thing. When you're fostering, they do offer a small stipend for you to help take care of this. There's, especially if you're fostering younger children, there is a stipend to help take care of your daycare expenses. I mean, the state tries to make it as easy on you as possible. Clothing allowances twice a year for them. Kids loved when there were clothing allowances because we would just go shopping and get, all the things. And and it's really great that they give you that time, that opportunity to really just help them so much. And for us, there's a benefit that we the medical subsidy that continued after our children were adopted has been very helpful for us in being able to afford, the therapy for my son, to know that he can get as much therapy as he needs because of the subsidy is amazing. So we don't have to limit it because of our finances. My daughter takes a medication that I call liquid platinum, and because it's so very expensive, to know that we don't have to worry about that or any of her testing supplies or any of her visits. She can see all the specialists that she needs to, because it's covered by that. And honestly, craziness. Our daughter, our 11-year-old, needs braces. And so my husband and I were trying to get this done, by the end of the year, before you lose that money in your flex spending account. Can we all just testify to how much aspirin we buy at the end of the year so we don't lose that money? And so we went to the orthodontist to have them talk about it. His insurance chips in some. We knew that, we had this flex spending account, and we just found out that if you adopt a child you're not biologically related to in Michigan, they kick in money for orthodontic work. And we had no idea. I was like, braces for everybody right now. Like, everybody's getting braces because, there are just these things, that you learn. And, we post adoption, we learned so many different things. Our children have some, credits already paid for them at a community college, because they're adopted children, because really the state is trying to set them up for a successful future. They have kind of looked at like that end goal, long-term deal with them, which is fantastic. And so I don't ever think finances need to stop anybody from fostering. If you foster young children, I know that there's WIC available. For a long time, our agency was giving diapers to families. There's always a benefit out there for you, always a support system. And really, truly, finances should never be a reason to stop you from doing it. And honestly, nothing. If that's what God wants from you, if you're like, I don't know, kids like me, if you're feeling it, man, do it. You're going to be amazed. Nothing should stop you. It'll come through.
And not to be political at all, but I hear people talking about the awful situations on the border and family separation, but it's sort of a removed kind of thing that you can debate about. This is a very practical. There are families being separated. There are these helpless children, innocent children who have already been done tremendous wrong in their young lives.
Right.
And here we are as adults.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've had this discussion with people too, who say like, I would rather just adopt out of country and all this too. And I am in no way, shape or form saying don't ever do international adoption. If that's where your heart is led, then that's where your heart is led. But you're right. We have these children in our country growing up without permanent places to live and without their basic need of a family. That is a basic need of every human being, is to have a family, to be loved, to have a home. And no amount of growing up in America, just because you're in America, is going to make up for that. A child in need of a family is a child in need of a family, regardless of what country they're in, regardless of their upbringing, regardless of their race, their gender, their nationality, their religious preference, regardless of any of that. The kid needs a family, a kid needs a family. And you're absolutely right. We have all of these children waiting right now. There are hundreds of children in Michigan waiting to be adopted whose parental rights have already been terminated. We have very practical ways of taking care of these kids. We can actually do something for children right now. We don't have to, go for these big elaborate measures. We have children who have futures that need to be shaped, and we can help them with that.
For anybody who is watching this live, if you're watching on Zoom, there's the Q&A box. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to write a comment, or also you can send an email to amanda@nrinstitute.org, and she'll be texting me the questions. We have about 10 minutes with Melissa Buck here. Melissa, so practically speaking, if you have pricked people's consciences as they're listening to this live or watching it later, like, what do they do? Okay,
Yeah,
this
no, you're right.
Me to action. What do I do?
If my rant did, earlier, well, I got all excited. Did anything? Yeah, you know what? You can look up in your area. You can just type in foster care adoption agencies, and a whole list will come up for you. Typically, the countywide, DHS ones will come up first. In Michigan, we have something called the Michigan Adoption Resource Exchange. We call it MARE for short, where you can go to view children who are already waiting for adoption. So if you're somebody who's like, man, I don't know about fostering, but I would rather just take a kid. Guess what? They're there. They're waiting. There's sibling groups waiting. They will give you background information. There's pictures of the kids. They'll tell you about the kind of needs that they have and how to get in contact with someone if you find a child that you're interested in. Facebook is another great place to look, but really just going online, looking for an agency, contacting them, asking for child welfare, and saying, hey, I'm interested in becoming a foster parent. Oftentimes they have either via Zoom or in person, depending where you are, sort of like an introductory class where they will ask you some information. Nobody's going to send you home with a kid that night, I promise. And they'll let you do that. Also looking for foster care and adoption support groups. I find that it is often easier to ask your really awkward questions to somebody who has already been doing foster care and adoption, because we have nothing to gain from telling, from changing our answers. We have nothing to lose from telling you the truth. We're going to flat out tell you how it is. I love getting messages from people who say to me, hey, I've been thinking about this, but I have these questions. Can you just tell me, what? I love that. I love being able to tell people how I truly feel, and then letting them kind of take it from there.
And what are the questions that people have as stumbling blocks the most, besides I'm not worthy?
Yeah. Well, like you said, financial stuff. I work all day. What do I do with the kids? Where can I send them? How do you give a child back is another one. If they're reunifying with the birth parent, which is always the goal of foster care. And we've done it. We have reunified a child with the birth parent. We had relatives step up for this little baby we had. It's hard. It's possible, but it's not a quick in and out process. It's a lengthy change where at some point the child will be living with a birth parent more than they're living with you, and it just you're sort of ready at the same time for them to go full time to the birth parent. It can be a very beautiful thing. Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of that, or just like, what do you do? What are they going to do to my house? Like, what are the behaviors like? What if my family's not on board with that? We get all of that. And from existing foster parents, we get a lot of, is it normal if, happens, or why do they do this? And what's the court system doing with this? And, you get a lot of like those kinds of questions, and which is great. I love it. We've seen so much. We've had all different types of experiences, birth families and kids, that we have a pretty good understanding of a lot of what goes on.
And if your family is against it, that's where the great agency and the support groups are so critical.
Yes, definitely. And I've seen a lot of families come along. Families are difficult, or, in that, well, they're not difficult, but families are, they have a hard time with letting a kid come into their lives and loving them too. You're making a choice to bring a kid into the family. And if they love that kid and that kid leaves, then there's going to be heartbreak on their end as well.
Mhm.
Not everybody always understands why you do what you do, but they're not living your life. They don't have your heart.
Mhm.
Um, and you just, a lot of people will come around. You would be really surprised.
It sounds to me like your life is such an encounter with Jesus on the cross, I mean,
Yeah.
that is love, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not a box of chocolate on Valentine's Day.
No, but a nap is love as well. I mean, I will go with right there too. So
Well, and that's exactly what I mean when I say everybody has a role. Like, so be the friend who comes over and lets you take a nap.
yeah, definitely. We, at our church, we've always done things where, when someone has a baby, you bring them food for like the first couple of weeks. And when we would get kids, people would bring us food. And I loved it because it's so crazy up in there, especially when you're getting a newborn. You're like, I didn't know I was having a baby yesterday. And now I have one. And you're just not always super prepared. But I mean, I've picked up bottles off of people's porches late at night because we got a kid later. My sister has always said, she is not cut out for foster care, but she can be a foster aunt. And that's her job. She is the aunt to those kids. She spoils them. She, gives them cookies behind my back. She's always been that way. And we're very fortunate in our family that they understand adoption and the whole thing. My parents have always been really supportive of our kids too. And Chad's mom is like, that's it. I'm grandma. Call me grandma. That's it. And so we've been fortunate. Yeah, we definitely have a village, and it's a big, village, and you need one. I mean, you really do.
Right. So we only have a couple minutes left. What do you want people to know about all of this that hasn't been said? And do have a little closing rant about the sibling group thing, because I can imagine that a lot of people are listening and they're like, well, this woman says she's not amazing, but she's clearly amazing because she's
No. It's just because I showered today and I had coffee. I mean, it's just tricks. It's smoking mirrors. No, I mean, really, there are kids out there who need love, and that's the greatest thing. We're not, we're not fancy. I don't have like a PhD in psychology or anything like that. I'm just a regular chick who sometimes is slightly inappropriate, who, has never quite become a full grown up. And yet we're able to do this. So I don't think anything should make you feel like, it's holding you back from all of this. We have kids in need of a family. Are you capable of loving a kid? Are you capable of, of not, losing them in your house or something? You know what I mean? Like, are you capable of doing those things? Fantastic. You can be a foster parent. You can love them well. And there is just such a huge, great need. Find yourself an agency. I wish everybody could go through St. Vincent's. I love them so much. I'm so grateful for them and grateful to Beckett for the work that they're doing, for keeping them open. And really, please consider opening your hearts to having a sibling group come into your home. I mean, we are talking about the most basic rights. There's a kid outside my window right now. There's me. I can hear him. And so, yeah, there's just the most basic rights of these kids to be siblings. They're taken from these birth homes, but wasn't their choice. It's for their safety and in their best interest, but it is not in their best interest to then be separated. We, again, like I said before, we have to do better. We're talking about kids aging out of the system, siblings. We have to do better. We need to really, really think about these children and their rights. They have no voice. We are their voice in all of this. And we can say it is not all right to separate them the way that they are. So if you're not feeling like you can do it yourself, be a friend to one, offer to be a respite home, and be an advocate. You don't have to be able to foster to be able to advocate for what's right.
Right.
So Yeah. And thank you so much, Kathryn. You know, I love you and all the work that you do. You have such
Likewise,
a good
Melissa.
voice and you have such a great platform and way to reach people. And I love every time that you ask me to do anything because I'm just so grateful and thankful that you are willing to let me blab.
Whenever you want to talk, you know where to find me. And I have to say, Melissa, honestly, like I walk through the streets of Manhattan and it's become more and more dangerous to have conversations with homeless people because of the levels of addiction and anger all
Mhm.
during this coronavirus time. So I don't have the same conversations that I used to have, but I'm so struck by how young some of these men are.
Mhm.
And I'm constantly thinking, first of all, there, but by the grace of God go I, right? I mean, we don't have choices as children about what our situation is going to be. But I think of you, Melissa, and what happened in these people's lives, probably in childhood. There's
Yeah.
some horrible case of this woman who's on death row, and she's going to be executed if the courts don't stop. And her whole life story is just she never had a chance, abuse and
Yeah.
every awful thing you can think of. And when you know there are children who have been born in those circumstances in our country, like we can't stop talking about it, and
Oh, yeah.
we have to
Absolutely.
do whatever we can. So I am so grateful for you, for telling your story and doing it with such authenticity and truth. And we started this a couple of minutes late because of your.
Because I had to go deal with a child. Yes. Who I love.
thought that was
If he could come in here and sit in my lap the whole time, it would be great. He would be really goofy, but yeah, exactly. And thank you for doing that because I mean,
absolutely. Well, I thought it was the perfect way
life.
to start. This is real life. We're not sugarcoating it here.
My life.
Yeah. Well, thank
Yeah,
you for sharing your life with us.
thank
And
you.
I can't wait till the next time we talk.
I know, me either. I just thank you so much and I look forward to working with you again soon.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you everyone who's watching live or who watching it later on. And share this video with other people who you don't even know if they're interested in adoption or not, because maybe they will be.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right, God bless.